The tide remembers, always. Imagine a wedding feast, glittering halls, laughter echoing off golden walls. And the person serving the dishes is plotting your death. Sounds impossible. It isn't, not in this story. Today, we uncover the cook's slave who poisoned an entire family on a wedding day, a chilling tale of betrayal and revenge that history forgot. Before we dive in, hit subscribe, smash like, and share this story with anyone who loves dark, historical mysteries. You'll want to see what happens next. The morning of the wedding was bright, almost mocking in its cheerfulness. Outside, carriages rolled up. Townspeople gathered to watch the grandest event of the year. Flowers swayed. Children laughed. Music floated on the breeze. Inside, the halls shimmered with gold. Crystal glasses sparkled. Tables groaned under the weight of meats, pies, and exotic fruits. The air smelled of roasted spices and sweet desserts. A perfect day, or so they thought. She moved in the shadows. The cook, quiet, watching, waiting. Years of cruelty and humiliation had carved a fire into her chest. Her masters never noticed her. They never guessed. But today the invisible would be the most powerful. The bride and groom smiled unaware. Guests raised glasses. Toasts were made. Laughter echoed through the hall. The tide remembers. In the kitchen, she worked with meticulous precision. Every spice, every sprinkle, every garnish had a purpose. Hidden among the savory meats and sweet pastries were poisons so subtle, so invisible no one would notice, until it was too late. She paused. Her eyes flicked to the portraits on the walls. Generations of cruelty stared back. Smug faces, sharp noses, cold eyes. Every insult, every harsh word, every stolen coin, all led to this moment. The tide remembers. The first platters were carried into the hall. Gold and silver glimmered in the sunlight. Guests marveled, unaware of the hidden danger in each bite. Candles flickered. Shadows stretched along the walls. The room felt alive, as if the very house were watching. The tide remembers. She lingered at the doorway, calm, serene, patient, watching the family devour the meal she had prepared so carefully. Each bite brought her closer to years of quiet revenge. Every morsel a step toward justice. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. The cliffs loomed in the distance. The sea rose and fell. The tide remembers the first coughs. A guest clutched her throat. Murmurs spread. Panic erupted. Eyes widened in horror. The cook stepped back. She remained unseen, silent, unshakable. She was the vessel of retribution, the hand of history finally balancing itself. Glowing eyes seemed to flicker in the corners of the room. Shadows stretched unnaturally. Something moved in the edges of vision, almost imperceptible. Whispers of the wronged, whispers of the dead. She was their chosen vessel. Their revenge had a shape, and it wore an apron the family had no idea. Not yet, not until it was too late. Their laughter, their joy, their arrogance, all feeding into a moment that would be remembered forever. The feast had begun. And so had the reckoning. Next, we'll see how the cook orchestrates the feast with deadly precision. Every bite, every sip, every smile becomes a step closer to a terrifying climax. The tide remembers. And so will you. The first bite would change everything. One sip, one taste, and nothing would ever be the same. In this next chapter of the cook slave who poisoned an entire family on a wedding day, we watch her plan unfold, a slow, deadly dance of revenge no one could see coming. The kitchen smelled of roasted meat and sweet pastries. Steam curled from pots, golden crusts gleamed, and every dish looked like a masterpiece. But beneath the surface a secret waited, a poison so subtle it would kill without a trace. She moved with precision, each hand motion deliberate. Every sprinkle of herbs, every dash of spice, every ladleful of sauce was part of her plan. Years of suffering had sharpened her focus. Every insult, every harsh word she had endured, fed the fire inside her. The first platter was ready. Golden roast, glazed fruits, buttery pastries, a feast worthy of kings. The guests would never suspect a thing. The bride's eyes sparkled as she lifted her fork. The groom laughed at a joke from his cousin. The cook's lips curved into the faintest smile. Perfect. She paused. The portraits on the walls seemed to stare harder. Generations of pride, arrogance, cruelty. They had laughed at her, ignored her. Today they would pay. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. A distant wave crashed against the cliffs. She felt it in her bones. Today, justice would be served. The tide remembers. She placed the next dish on the table. A subtle aroma of honey masked the bitter truth inside. Guests murmured their delight, tasting the sweetness, oblivious. Laughter floated through the hall, but each bite carried a curse. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with anticipation. The cook had become more than a servant today. She was the architect of fate. She was the unseen hand that would bring a proud family to its knees. The servants carried more platters. She watched every step, every movement. Not one of her plans could fail. She had thought of everything: timing, taste, presentation. No one could trace her. No one would survive to tell. Outside, shadows deepened. Candles flickered unnaturally. Something whispered from the corners, an echo of wronged souls. She shivered slightly, a reminder that she was no longer alone. The dead had chosen her as their vessel. Their vengeance flowed through her hands. The guests were distracted. Toasts were made, glasses raised. Every cheer brought her closer to the moment she had imagined for years. And yet a dark thrill coursed through her. She could almost hear the gasp, the panic, the chaos that would erupt when the poison took hold. She stepped back to the doorway, calm, serene, watching her plan unfold. The tide remembers. The family did not. The first signs of poison are about to appear. Smiles will fade. Panic will spread. And she, the quiet cook, will watch as her carefully crafted revenge begins its deadly dance. The first coughs echoed through the hall. A fork clattered to the floor, and then panic. In this chilling chapter of the cook-slave who poisoned an entire family on a wedding day, the deadly feast begins to take its toll, and the cook's revenge inches closer to completion. If you haven't yet, hit subscribe, smash like and share this story. You need to see how this nightmare unfolds. The hall was alive with laughter one moment, horror the next. Guests froze mid-bite, eyes widened, hands clutched throats, faces twisted in confusion, then pain. The bride gasped. Her smile vanished. The groom staggered. Cousins and aunts turned pale, clutching their stomachs. A servant dropped a platter. Chaos erupted in seconds. The cook remained in the shadows, calm, watching. Every movement, every gasp, every stumble played exactly as she had imagined. Years of silent suffering had led to this precise moment. She moved quietly, almost invisible. Guests screamed, stumbled, and fell. The golden hall, once filled with laughter, became a stage of terror. Silverware clinked against the floor. Candles flickered. Shadows danced unnaturally along the walls. Outside, the wind howled. The sea rose against the cliffs as if it too were aware of the carnage inside. The tide remembers. The cook's heart did not race. Not with fear, with satisfaction. Every dish had done its job. Every poisoned bite carried the weight of years of humiliation, cruelty, and neglect. The proud family, arrogant and dismissive for generations, had no idea what struck them. Whispers floated through the hall. "What is happening?" Guests trembled. "Call a doctor!" Someone screamed, but it was too late. Panic spread like wildfire. She glanced at the portraits once more. The ancestors seemed to watch her, approving. Their legacy of cruelty was ending at last. The tide remembers. Even in the chaos, she noticed small details. The child hiding under the table, the maid clutching her apron, the groom's hand shaking as he tried to stand. She didn't move to help. Justice was impartial, silent, perfect, and then came the silence. Slowly, almost unnaturally, the room stilled. Only groans and whispered cries remained. The cook stepped further into the doorway, her presence still unnoticed. She was more than a servant now. She was the architect of fate, the vessel of vengeance. A candle flickered violently, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Glowing eyes seemed to watch from corners of the room. Something whispered. A voice carried on the wind. The dead had chosen her. They moved through her, Through her plan. Through the poison itself, the family's laughter would never return. Their arrogance, their cruelty, their dismissive smiles erased. The cook watched silently, calm, serene. She did not celebrate, nor did she feel guilt. She was only the hand, the instrument, the vessel. The aftermath is about to unfold. Guests lie strewn across the hall. Panic spreads beyond the walls. And the question remains, will she escape, or will the world turn on the woman who became the instrument of death? Silence fell. Not the quiet of peace, but the silence of horror. The hall smelled of smoke, spilled wine, and death in this shocking chapter of the cook-slave who poisoned an entire family on a wedding day. We see the terrifying aftermath of her deadly plan and the panic that spreads beyond the golden halls. The guests lay scattered across the hall. Some groaned. Some stared blankly at the ceiling. Others were already lifeless. Candles flickered weakly, casting long, quivering shadows on the walls. The golden hall, once full of celebration, looked like a tomb. The cook watched silently from the doorway. Her hands were clean, her face calm. She had done what no one believed possible. She had turned a joyous wedding into a nightmare. The perfect, silent revenge. Outside, the wind screamed through the cliffs. Waves crashed violently against the rocks. The sea rose like a dark omen. The tide remembers. Servants stumbled in, panic-stricken, calling for doctors, screaming for help. Their shouts echoed off the walls, but it was too late. No medicine, no prayers, no frantic cries could undo what had been done. The poison was finished. The family was finished. She stepped back into the shadows. No one suspected her. Not a whisper, not a glance. She blended with the flickering light, the dark corners, the smoke curling from the hearth. The perfect invisibility. The perfect escape. The portraits on the walls seemed to shift in the candlelight. Generations of cruel ancestors watched, approval in their painted eyes. Justice had been served at last. Outside the mansion, neighbors began to notice something was wrong. Smoke rose from the windows. Cries carried across the gardens. The town would soon know. Panic would spread like wildfire, and yet she felt something else, a cold weight in her chest, a whisper in the wind. She was not alone. The dead, the ones she had invoked, the ones whose suffering she carried, were watching, approving, guiding. They moved through her, the vessel of vengeance, the hand that delivered justice. She could feel them in the kitchen, in the hall, in the golden glow of the wedding candles. The shadows lengthened unnaturally. The air thickened. Glowing eyes flickered in the corners of her vision. The tide remembers. For a brief moment she wondered. Would her actions be punished? Would the world see her as a criminal? Or would they whisper her name in fear and awe for generations to come? The wind carried the screams into the night. The sea rose higher against the cliffs. And the cook, calm, silent, untouchable, vanished into the shadows, leaving the chaos behind. Rumors would spread. The town would whisper about the tragedy. But some secrets are invisible. Some vengeance is untouchable. And the cook? She had only just begun to become legend.
By morning, the town was alive with whispers, but some secrets refused to stay buried. In this chapter of the cook-slave who poisoned an entire family on a wedding day, the deadly feast leaves a trail of fear, suspicion, and the first hints of the cook's unstoppable vengeance. The sun rose over the cliffs, painting the town in pale gold. Smoke curled from the mansion's windows. The silence of the previous night had given way to murmurs, cries, and frantic footsteps. People gathered at the gates, eyes wide, voices trembling. "They're all dead," someone whispered. "Poison," another said. Who could do such a thing? The cook moved unnoticed among the chaos. She carried herself as if nothing had happened. Calm, serene, invisible. But inside, she felt the pull of something greater. The dead, the ancestors. The tide remembered. Investigators arrived, their boots echoing across the marble floors. They examined the hall. They poked at the golden feast remnants. But the dishes had been cleaned, wiped, rearranged. Everything appeared normal, invisible, perfect. No one suspected the cook. No one. She was a shadow, a ghost among the living. Years of servitude had taught her how to vanish, how to blend, how to manipulate perception. She had learned the art of invisibility, and it was the dead who guided her. The townspeople whispered in corners. Fear spread faster than fire. Rumors twisted into legends. The cook, they said, she is cursed. Others called her a witch. Some swore the portraits on the walls had watched and approved. The wind carried strange noises through the mansion, a faint rustle, almost a whisper. Some said they saw glowing eyes in the hallways. Others claimed the shadows moved on their own. The tide remembers, and through it all she walked silently. She did not gloat. She did not tremble. She was the vessel, the instrument, the hand of vengeance. Every whisper, every frightened glance, every rumor of supernatural involvement fed her purpose. The investigators grew frustrated. Nothing made sense. There were no signs of struggle. No weapon, no motive, only fear. Only the subtle knowledge that justice had been delivered in the deadliest way possible. The town would talk about this night for decades. Stories of the golden wedding hall, of laughter turned to screams, of shadows that seemed alive. And in the middle of it all stood the cook, unseen, untouchable, her secret locked tight in the silence she carried. Outside, the cliffs loomed. The sea rose and fell violently. The tide remembers, and so did she. The world may never fully understand what happened inside that hall. But one thing is certain, the cook's legend is only growing. And the dead, they are not done with her yet. The town whispered her name. Fear, awe, and curiosity tangled in every sentence. But would anyone dare face her? In this chapter of the cook-slave who poisoned an entire family on a wedding day, the full consequences of her deadly feast come to light, and the cook's fate teeters between legend and doom. If you haven't already, subscribe, hit like, and share this story. The conclusion will shock you. The mansion was silent, empty, except for the echoes of that night's horror. The town feared to enter. Windows were shuttered, the gates locked. Stories spread, whispers of glowing eyes, moving shadows, and the faintest laughter of someone unseen. The cook moved through the town like a ghost. She did not run. She did not hide. She walked calmly, carrying the weight of the dead on her shoulders. Every step she took reminded her she was their vessel, their instrument, their hand of vengeance. The tide remembers. Some claimed she had vanished completely. Others swore they saw her silhouette at dusk, standing by the cliffs, staring at the sea as if listening to voices only she could hear. The wind carried murmurs of her deeds across the hills. Some townsfolk would not eat a meal without checking twice who had prepared it. Fear lingered. Respect followed. Authorities tried to find her. They scoured the town, questioned servants, even inspected her old kitchen. But the cook had thought of every detail. Every trace, every hint of guilt was gone. She was invisible. Perfectly so, and yet there were signs. Small, almost imperceptible. Shadows seemed darker near her. Glowing eyes flickered in corners when she passed. Objects moved slightly as if pushed by unseen hands. The dead had not left her side. They were with her still. The tide remembers. The town slowly realized one terrifying truth: she was untouchable. Not because she was clever, but because she had become more than human. She had become the vessel of those wronged, the channel through which revenge flowed. Anyone who crossed her would face consequences they could not understand. Years passed, but the legend did not fade. Stories of the golden wedding hall, of screams and shadows, of a cook who could wield the dead themselves, spread far and wide. Mothers whispered it to children. Travelers told it in inns. And the cook? She remained in the shadows, calm, silent, eternal. And sometimes when the wind screamed through the cliffs, the townspeople swore they could hear her footsteps, or the faintest whisper of a warning. The tide remembers. Her story was not just one of revenge. It became a legend, a warning. And the dead? They were still with her, shaping her destiny and the terror she carried. The final chapter will reveal how far her legend would stretch, and who would dare challenge the cook who had become death itself. Some stories end in silence, others in screams. Hers ended in whispers that would never die. In the shocking conclusion of the cook-slave who poisoned an entire family on a wedding day, we see how her revenge became legend, and why the dead still lingered with her. If you haven't yet, subscribe, hit like, and share this story. The chilling finale is not for the faint of heart. The mansion stood empty. Golden halls now cracked, dust settling over the remnants of terror. The family was gone. Their laughter, arrogance, and cruelty all vanished in the blink of a poisoned bite. But their memory lingered, twisted into the town's whispers. The cook? She had vanished. No one saw her leave. Some claimed she walked along the cliffs at dusk, the wind carrying her whispers. Others swore the shadows moved with her, carrying her presence unseen. The tide remembers she had become more than a woman, more than a servant. She was a vessel. The dead had chosen her, their vengeance flowing through her hands, shaping her every move. Every meal, every shadow, every flickering candle became a tool in her quiet domination. Rumors spread like wildfire. Travelers spoke of the golden wedding hall turned tomb. Children were warned not to enter kitchens alone. Mothers whispered, the cook remembers. And so do the dead, fear and respect entwined. Her legend had grown beyond the town into the stories of the living and the unseen. Yet, she never celebrated. She never boasted. Calm and serene, she moved among the world as one unseen, one untouchable. The dead lingered at her side, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark, their whispers guiding her, their power flowing through her. She had become both history and myth. The cliffs whispered secrets to her as the sea roared below. The tide remembers, and so did she. Every injustice, every cruelty, every slight fed the eternal fire of her legend. Those who had wronged others in her town soon found themselves haunted, not always by her, but by the knowledge that vengeance could take the most unexpected form. Even decades later, the mansion's ruins drew the curious and the foolish. Some claimed they saw her silhouette at the windows. Some heard footsteps in the abandoned hallways. Others swore the shadows had glowing eyes, a reminder that she was never truly gone. The cook had become immortal in fear and memory and whispers. Her story was more than revenge. It was a warning, a tale that generations would tell. The quiet, invisible servant can wield the dead themselves. The smallest hand can deliver the largest justice. The tide remembers. And in the night, when the wind screamed and the sea crashed against the cliffs, some claimed to hear a faint whisper carried across the waves. Justice is served. And I am still here. If you were captivated by this dark tale, make sure to subscribe, hit like, and share it with friends. Dark history hides everywhere, and some stories are waiting to be discovered.